What I want to share today is kind of deep. I have a friend who's really struggling right now with a child that has mental illness. And for a long time, I always say if it's not your story to share, don't share. So I'm not going to share my beautiful friend Courtney's story. It's not my story to share. She is sharing it, and it is on her page if you read it. She is the boss babe. She owns Sense of Style. She's amazing, her and her husband, and you can go and follow her and hear that. I talked about it lightly in my book. I will talk about it. It's nothing I'm ashamed of, but I felt like today I was literally, it was just like God was telling me, you need to share this. I want you to know the reason why I haven't shared this is because I think too many times in life, we all go through stuff. We all have messes. We all have, like make your mess your message. We have things that we go through, that we've grown through. And I've never really shared the whole entire story, so I'm kind of telling a story time now. I'm actually wanting to share this because this shaped me so profoundly to who I am. And I felt like I've never really shared it. And as I've sat here and I've worked from my little chair today in my office, not my office, my bedroom. This is not my office. I talked about having a mother that was, I guess when I was younger, I didn't understand it, but she was definitely, she suffered from mental illness. And I don't ever remember a time in my life when my mother wasn't suffering from that. And so I had a really hard time understanding so many things that happened to me when I grew up. And I want to just talk about what happened, but also what came from that. So basically, my mother came from a very dysfunctional upbringing herself, and by the time she had me, she had been raped. She had a mother who never once told her she loved her. Her father had left her mother. It was just a big mess. But what happened in all of this stuff, my mother ended up with my father, who was married, who had 3 children, and she ended up getting pregnant with me when she was 18 years old. And obviously my dad was not happy about this and wanted my mom to have an abortion, and in so much he was very mean to my mom, so he actually used to beat my mom, and he beat her when she was pregnant with me in the hopes that it would cause her to have a miscarriage. She did not miscarry me, of course, but it was very obvious that he controlled her, and he was very not only was he verbally mean to her, he was physically mean to her, and I witnessed that. I saw that. I grew up with that. And unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately, I believe, he left his wife and he married my mother, and they got married. And that was really when I remember going to school sometimes and being deserted. I would get out of school and there was no one there to pick me up. There was no one there. And there were times, you guys, when I literally would walk 2 miles home from in elementary school and junior high. I walked home, and I learned how to walk home because there was no one there to pick me up. And you may go, what? That's just so weird. I had to learn to parent myself. There were times we didn't have food or heat, and I just learned to either not have food, or I would go into our pantry and look for like a can of something, and I would open up the can and I'd eat a can of green beans, or I would eat things. And so one of the things I knew was that something wasn't right with my mom. But I didn't understand because I would see everybody at school with their mothers coming in and helping the class, or their moms taking them to school and all this, and I didn't quite understand it. At times when the bus scheduled, we always took the bus, so I could take the bus. And so I also had those times when, I never came home to a mother. If I came home to a mother at home, my mother worked off and on. She would either be in bed, completely in bed, asleep, didn't even know we were there. I would say the majority of the time, because she was basically, back then, I don't know if it's this way now, she was going to psychiatrists that just kept her on drugs. They kept her on heavy psychotic drugs to where she just became addicted to her pain, her stuff. And so she was always asleep, or when she wasn't asleep, my mom was very volatile, like bipolar, like she would say the meanest things, or she would throw things, or one time my mother and dad, by this time they had gotten divorced, and my mother had a boyfriend, and I remember they broke up, and my mom made me go with her to his house because he had broke up with her, and he told her he was crazy, and she was going around all his windows at his house, and she was beating on the windows, saying, I know you have a, swearing at him that he had a girl there. Don't know if he did, but then she then came home and took every bit of his clothing and anything he had, and she burned them in a big pile outside of our house. And I remember growing up thinking, this is crazy, but at the same time, I never invited friends over to our house, you guys. I never wanted anybody to know that, like, what my sister and I were going through. I didn't want people to know that we didn't have food, in so much that I just went hungry. I was not gonna, try to get on free food, because I remember one time I said to my mom when I was really young, I said, Mom, can I fill out this form? There's people that get free food, and can I get free food so I can eat during the day? And she goes, no, we would never do that. And so I remember that was, something that she said no to, but it was really hard to pretend like you weren't hungry at school. So I would always say, like, oh, well, I'm not hungry. Or I would, if people were eating, like my friends, like I really didn't have friends, but if there were people sitting by me that had food, and if they ever offered me food, I would eat it. And so if you want to know the reality of why I grew up with an eating disorder, it was because of the severe not having food. When there was food around, you guys, I ate it ferociously. Like, because I didn't know when my next meal was going to come from. I didn't know. We went through, with my mom being so, with her mental illness, we often didn't have heat in our house. We lived in a really nice house, but my mom, that my dad and mom had bought, we couldn't afford to live there. And so we didn't have heat oftentimes. So my mom bought a kerosene heater, and we would all stay in a room. And so I knew what it was like not to have food. I knew what it was like not to have these things. But you guys, when I was that age, I didn't know. I didn't understand. I didn't understand at times when my mom had to go and be in the hospital. And I remember one time my mom was, they would say they admitted her to the psychiatric ward. And I remember several times my mom going and getting admitted. And just to be honest with you, one time I remember my grandmother coming to watch us, but the other times my sister and I would often be at home alone, like no one watching us, you guys. Like, we were on our own, and we were young. And the crazy thing about it was I didn't understand. And so back in the day, you guys, I don't know if you guys remember this, but they used to do electric shock therapy. Or therapy. I don't know if you've heard of that. So they would shock her. I don't know where they would do it. I would imagine in her head. I don't know. I don't think they do that anymore, but they tried to do that because my mom was severely depressed, bipolar, I don't want to self-diagnose my mom. I'm just telling you from what I experienced with my mom. And even as I got up older and went off and decided to go to college, my mom was still doing very manic things. Like, my mom was very on me. She would always say, Teresa, if you lost weight, you would be prettier. If you, and you guys, I was thin. Like, I look back on it now, like, my mom really wanted, I think she wanted me to be perfect because then that made her perfect. But we all know there's no such thing as perfection. And that's why I believe in just being really real. So a lot of people may not know this, but that is why I did not have friends come over to my house, because I never knew what to expect. I didn't know what my mom was going to do. I didn't know when my dad was still living there, it was very violent, and it was mixed with her mental illness. And I didn't realize it, but at a young age, I wondered if my mom was mentally ill, did that mean I was mentally ill? And I think that scared me because I thought, oh gosh, if my mom is manic and depressed and all these things, does that mean I'm going to be those things? If my dad was, and my dad was a just very, very, very not good person. And between both of them, when I say my sister, I really like raised myself. My sister raised herself. Like if I didn't do my homework, if I didn't take a bath, no one ever knew. I don't think I ever remember one time my mom saying, "Did you brush your teeth? Did you do this?" That just wasn't how I was raised. I basically had to raise myself. So I want you to know that the reason why I'm sharing this isn't at all like I don't feel bad for myself at all. In fact, I'm just so grateful that God allowed me to go through a situation that has helped me to be a better me. I do not have any ill feelings towards my mother. I didn't know how to write about it when I wrote my book, and I talked about my mom because my mom loved me as best as she could. And I knew my mom, even though my mom had issues and my mom was in and out of so many different treatments and going to doctors, and she never was happy. She never was able to conquer her mental illnesses. And I knew it took me so many years, you guys, to realize that there are so many people that are struggling with mental illness. And I don't even like the term mental illness, even though I know I like to say that mental challenges. Can we just say that? Mental challenges. And so I hear from people every day, whether it's a DM or whether it's just when I'm out and about, people talking about, we all have different things we deal with. Maybe it's depression. Maybe it's dealing with so many things that are mentally challenging for us, like I said, and that does not make us less than. And I think, I look back on it now, like it used to be taboo, you guys, and such a stigma. I want you to know that there is nothing wrong with getting help. There is nothing wrong with realizing that I believe we all go through, different times in our lives that we have things that we go through that actually help us to grow, and that we have to be okay knowing that like not everything we go through is something that we would have ever wanted to, obviously, but that going through those things, we can help others people with our story. We really can. And I was very honest with my children from a very young age, and I said, okay, you guys, let's just get it clear. I said, there are some things that happened to me that I'm going to be very aware that I'm going to do different because of what I went through. I made a choice not to drink alcohol and to do things like that and to do drugs because I saw what happened to my father, and I saw that my dad was a raging alcoholic and took drugs. That was part of his thing. And I said I knew my dad was a highly addictive personality, and I saw what happened because of that, and so I made the choice. A lot of people thought it was a religion thing. They were like, oh, you don't drink or smoke and do all that because of religion. I said, no, I don't do that because I've seen what addiction can do, and I do believe I have an addictive personality to food. So who's to say I'm not going to have an addictive personality to other things? So I chose not to do that. The other thing is I told my children about is I was like, your grandmother suffered from a lot of mental challenges and illness, and because of that, I don't know if it's something that could be passed on gene-wise. I don't know, but let's be aware. Let's be aware. Let's have open and honest dialogue about it, because if not, I don't want you to think that there's something wrong with you if you happen to feel depressed, or if maybe, you know, you are having feelings that you feel like you can't control. Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it head on and get the right treatments, the right medications. There's nothing wrong with needing to have help sometimes. And I think that is very freeing. I know that I had severe postpartum depression, and I was scared my children would have it. So I was very open to my kids when I had kids and said, hey, I had this. I hope that you don't have this, but if you do, let's get help for it. There's nothing wrong with this. So my hope is by talking about these things that we know that, like, you do not have to stay in a place of, how do I say this the way I want to say it? You can get help. That you can get help. We can help each other, and we have to tear down the walls and the stigma of what happened, and know that just because it happened to you doesn't mean that you have to then keep carrying that, and that there are things that you can do to stop those things. I've been very open and honest with my children and with those close to me, to tell them that, like, I knew that my mother loved me. I knew that I could get help, because I saw my mom not wanting to, more or less, she decided to just self-medicate, and she got to the point where her doctors would just give her medications, and she wasn't working on getting better. And I knew that I never wanted to be in that situation. So I guess I'm really honest with myself and my feelings and the things that I go through, because I really feel like in time, often it's really easy to put out the good out there, and like this is, and I think so many people think that everybody had this idyllic childhood. I guarantee you, if I went and asked into you individually, you could tell me something pretty painful that you went through, that maybe happened in your childhood. Maybe it was with your parents or someone in your family, your siblings, or things that really maybe changed you. Maybe they changed you for the better, but maybe they changed you in a way that had made you have limited thoughts about yourself. And so I want you to know that those are the things that we can get over. And I want you to know that part of why I'm doing this is to tell you that sometimes I pat myself on the back and I go, Teresa, you did it. You're doing it. You can still be all that you want to be, despite anything or anyone who made you feel less than. Guess what? Life isn't fair. Would I have loved to have the mother that was like the mother on TV, or the, you know, or the mother that I hope that I've somewhat been to my kids, you guys? I hope and pray that when I die and on my last day on this earth, that nothing more do I care nothing more than how my children and the people that love me care about me, how they feel about what I meant to them in their life. It has nothing to do with any kind of monetary success, but what my mark that I left on their hearts and in my grandchildren, and that I broke the cycle. I broke that cycle, and that I was willing to say, guess what? You're not perfect, Teresa. You can do this, and you can do better than that, and not to use flippant excuses. I was not going to be that girl. My mom, I love her so much, but her excuses was a victim, you guys. She was always, well, this is what happened to me, and I was raped, and this, and your dad did this, and it was always a victim. And I told myself from a young age, you are not going to be a victim. You're not going to be a victim. And that's how I run my business. That's how I run my family. I am not a victim. And I really believe that the stigma of everything that I went through, I want to boldly tell you that I think there's more people that can relate to my story than can't. I believe there's a lot more abuse out there than that we acknowledge and we know about, and we have to know that our voices have to be heard. I've told every one of my children, every one of my grandchildren, how no one is to touch your body. Your body is your own. You are never to allow people to hurt you or to touch you or to make you feel less than. And so you are an advocate for your life, your children, your grandchildren, your friends. I'm saying it boldly because I want you to know that maybe we have been victims at times in our life, but we do not have to play that out as our continuing life journey the rest of our life. We can say no more, no more, and use your voice and everything that you have to help other people. I'm proud of Courtney. I'm proud of her for sharing what she's going through with her daughter, because so many times we want to just like, it's the things that go on behind the closed doors. It's the things that we don't want people to know about. We don't want people to know that maybe we're in a really bad marriage. I'm not, but I'm just saying, I've been there. I've been in so many different situations, and I believe a lot of you have in your own situations. I believe we've all been taken advantage of in a business or working for somebody or all these different things, and oftentimes we feel like our voice cannot be heard, or we feel like we're the only ones, and I want you to know that we are not. I just want you to know that if there's one thing you can get from this today, and I thank you so much for joining me, one thing that you can hear from this message is you know better from everything you went through. You are better from everything you went through. Know that. Everything, I always say that our lessons can become our blessings if we choose to see it that way. And I can tell you, like, there's some sucky things that we've all went through. We are all going through this. And the more I love talking to people, one of the things I love to do after I get off stage and I'm talking to someone and someone comes up to me, I usually will say, what I feel always is I want to connect with them, and I said, what did you hear? What spoke to you when I spoke? What was it? And it's usually different for different segments, and different things I said will touch other people, because we all have went through crap. We have all went through stuff that makes us stronger. Everything we go through, we can grow through. We really can. Okay, you guys, I love you so much. I know this was really personal. I know that, like, I want you to know that I know my mom is looking at me from heaven, and she is saying, girl, I love you. And I used to think that she would be mad at me for sharing the reality of my childhood. And, but I know, and I feel it so strongly, that she knows that she's just so proud of me for not using any excuse to try to be the best human being that I could be. And that's really what it's about, you know. And you do, Charlotte, you do have the courage. I know you do. And if you don't have the courage to do it publicly like I am, write it down. Write it down or share it to people closest to you, because I know that sometimes keeping it in, it has a power over us. And for many years, I know that I did that. And once I was able to finally, I did not, it's not something that I think is ever easy to tell people of the things that you went through. It gets easier. And if someone doesn't believe you, then they're not meant to be there to help you anyway. So just know that. So I love you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you. Keep sharing, keep posting. Your story matters. Remember that your story matters because you matter. Love you guys.